Back in the mid-1980s, I was working on a system, putting in some controls, when a boiler feed line like this began to have a water hammer, a vibrational problem. And I noticed the pipe changed temperature. And I thought, well, what would happen if we could harness this energy in a non-combustible source? And that led to the invention of the hydrosonic pump. It turned out to be my first invention. I'd never invented anything before.
Jim Griggs' first invention was to bring him into direct confrontation with the world of science.
Well, the first year or so, it was kind of just a project that was piddled with, kind of like a hobby on the weekends and spare time with friends. And that was the first time that we noticed the excess energy. It was back in the late 1980s. And I knew that you couldn't get more energy out than you put in. It violated the laws of physics. So I just set the pump to the side for a few months and just left it alone, didn't mess with it, trying to figure out where I was making my mistake.
Jim Griggs is bang in the middle of the American tradition that has spawned such men as the Wright brothers and Edison, inquisitive, good with machines, working away in their garages and back sheds to turn an idea into a device that works. In Griggs' case, the mistake in the calculations that he was so concerned about has not gone away. In fact, it seems to have turned into a major scientific heresy. The machine appears to produce more energy than it consumes, and Griggs is now convinced that that is no mistake. He has struggled for 4 years to turn his spare time enthusiasm into a serious business. What he has tried to do is to capture the intriguing effect he'd noticed in that vibrating boiler pipe and use it to create a totally new water heater, one that works without any heat source. His company now produces what amounts to a well-engineered water hammer. It thumps and smashes the water fed into it and raises the temperature to boiling point or to steam in a matter of seconds to replace household or industrial boilers. Now, they happen to call these machines pumps.
What we have is a hydrosonic pump that has a rotor located inside. It's a cylinder that has holes bored in it at specific angles and depths, ranging from a few hundred holes up to a few thousand, depending on whether we're going to make hot water or steam.
The key to the machine seems to be the number and the design of the holes in the rotor. Griggs has experimented with many different combinations to get the best results. The rotor fits tightly into a steel chamber with only a very small gap between the two. Water is fed into the gap and the rotor is spun rapidly by a small electric motor. As it spins, the water is pummeled and hammered through the holes. In seconds it flows out of the cylinder as hot water or steam. What's so extraordinary about such an ordinary-looking machine is the claim that it is more than 100% efficient. More energy has been measured coming out in the form of heat or steam than the electrical energy needed to turn the rotor. The term for this is over-unity. Scientifically, this is supposed to be impossible because it overturns the fundamental law of conservation of energy. It says you cannot get something for nothing. And yet, external observers claim to have measured here up to 70% more energy out than in.
It continues to bother me as something every day you get up and you look to say, well, maybe today I'll find where I made my mistake in my calculations and this will be explained. Or a scientist will come up with a theory that will fit what we're doing and explain it.
Tom Droege has had a distinguished career at one of the leading scientific centres in America, Fermilab. He also has a nationwide reputation as an investigator into the unusual. He's far too experienced to worry about the impact on his career of working on the fringes of science. When news about Jim Griggs' invention began to spread, Droege was contacted hundreds of miles away in his home city of Chicago.
I came to Georgia out of an internet group, just happened to put up a note that says, why don't we send Tom Droege to Georgia to investigate this device? What I said to the group is that I can't go and prove that it's right or wrong. What I can do is go and look and see if the way he approaches the problem makes sense to me and if he's doing all the right kinds of things.
Tom Droege was on his way to meet Jim Griggs and his business partner Kelly Hudson.
I believe that most of the scientific community is just closed-minded about this, and they'll always be looking, or not always, hopefully not always, but are basically looking for anything to discredit or disprove what we're doing. And you know, you're going up against some pretty smart people that are saying that.
Well, I really don't expect to find anything positive here. None of these devices have panned out in the past, so I really don't expect this one to. Hi, I'm Tom Droege.
Jim Griggs. Tom,
Hi,
come
Jim.
in.
Good to meet you. What kind of efficiencies are you seeing out of this on like a hot water run?
The normal hot water run efficiencies run anywhere from around 108% efficient up to about 115% efficient.
I was shown that it was putting out, I don't know, 8 or 10% more energy than it was put in. But these are just numbers on a computer, and what you're looking for is something that's convincing. Now, what I did do is try to look at the experimental technique and ask very specific questions about how they made measurements.
Then we have generally 6 J-type thermocouples that feed back to the data acquisition system.
And then you've got a thermometer here just to check that the thermocouples are reading correctly.
Right. The company has invested probably in excess of $50,000 over the last year and a half to buy instrumentation and take the time to perform some of these measurements.
They've invested a fair amount of money and effort, and it was actually good enough to design to take the measurements they needed to take. What was missing was sophistication in the analysis of the measurements that they were taking. True. Yeah.
Tom's comments to us were that we were not a scientific laboratory, that we did not keep consistent log books, things that would be just acceptable, you know, a nice acceptable laboratory procedure in the scientific community. But our answer to that has been, we're the first ones to tell you we are not scientists. That is not our job.
One either plays the inventor game or you play the science game. If you're playing the inventor game, then you keep everything completely secret and you just sell your excess energy. If you're playing the science game, then there are specific rules that are in effect. And the key part of the science game is replication. There were not even the most fundamental scientific processes applied to the way of making the measurements and the way to analyze them. And so I don't think there's any particular reason to believe them as true.